Cab driver wouldn't let me leave. I live in Chicago and don't have a car, since public transportation is so much easier. I went to a gig at some bar. After it was done, I headed home. My friends and I were all taking different rail lines home, so we said goodbye and parted ways. After walking for a bit, I realized how late it was, and it hit me that the bus I was taking wasn't a late-night bus and didn't run past like 12 o'clock. I saw a taxi go by with its lights on. I usually don't use taxis because they're so expensive, but I was tired and just wanted to get home, to be honest. The guy stopped without me waving my hand, which I thought was weird, but oh well, he probably saw me, and I looked like I needed a ride, right? I hopped in and he asked where I'm going. I tell him my neighborhood and he heads that direction. I also didn't tell him where I lived exactly, but gave the main intersection closest to me. As we start getting closer, he starts asking about my tattoos and piercings. Whatever, I get asked a lot about them, so I just say where I got them, etc. He then asks if I have my nipples pierced or genitals pierced, and I tell him no. He then asks me to get a drink with him. I say I have a boyfriend. He then begins begging me. By this point, we're about to pull up to the intersection near my apartment, and I basically tell him thanks but no thanks, and he pulls over in a parking lot and won't unlock the doors. I look at him and he says to me, "The only way you're getting out of here is if you grab a drink." Then he gives me a sinister smirk. I'm practically shitting myself at this point, so I'm freaking out, and my phone's dead, so I couldn't even call anyone. I don't know how I thought of this, but I say, "Okay, we can grab some beer and hang out at my place, okay?" I tell him to pull into a 7-Eleven, and I can buy us the beer. I get out and tell him I'll be right back. He watched me the whole time I walked through the parking lot. I go in and ask as if I'm asking the cashier to open the cooler for me, but instead I'm like, "Hey, this taxi driver is fucking crazy, help me. I live not too far from the 7-Eleven, and know the cashier by name." He takes me in back, and walks me out the back door, and walks me the back alley to my apartment, maybe about 2 blocks, and has his coworker keep an eye on the guy until I get back safe. I got home safely and thanked the cashier a million times, and he said he was happy to help, and told me to keep my door locked, and that he tried to get the guy's license plate number. The dude left by the time the cashier got back though. I'd never taken a cab since, and don't plan on it again. Red Cab Trucker. This night occurred about 7 years ago, on my way home from my parents. I was 22 years old, young, naive, and well, dumb. I just moved into my first apartment. I was the first of my family to move away from our sleepy old train town that I grew up in. So I went home every Sunday to visit with the family, but mostly to do laundry and eat Sunday dinner. I lived about 45 to 60 minutes up the highway, so I generally headed home by 6. On this night in particular, there was a summer thunderstorm that had been pouring down rain relentlessly all day long. My cousins dropped in just as I was packing up to leave after dinner, so I ended up sticking around for a few more hours to visit. I left my mom's around 10 p.m. in the pouring rain, and this was the first time after moving from home that I encountered something that truly scared me. I don't know why I never told anyone about this. I think it had to do with pride, I guess. Everyone always gave me trouble about living alone as a single female, in a newish area. Anyways, here it goes. I left my parents around 10 p.m. in the pouring rain. Side note, I hate driving in rain. So I'm driving down the service road that leads out of town, and eventually turns into the on-ramp to the highway. As we're leaving town, the service road turns into one lane right, in front of this quarry train loading station thing. I'm not really clear on what this place is. It always gave me the creeps. If you're unfortunate enough to pass through when a train is crossing the road to load up, you'll be stuck there a while. Once the road passes the tracks, it turns back into 2 lanes and goes up a steep hill. As I'm approaching the quarry, I can make out the orange lights on a red cab 18-wheeler sitting in the quarry parking lot. Mind you, it is pouring rain outside. Visibility is low, so I can't make out the trucker until I'm pretty close to him. As soon as I can make out it was a trucker, it pulls out into the road. I had to slam on my brakes to avoid hitting the trailer on the back of the truck. I skid around on the road until I regain control of the car. So now, I'm stuck behind this dummy that just pulled out without paying attention, I assume. I keep my distance behind him because I am a little flustered. For the record, my headlights were on, so if he had been paying attention, he should have been able to see me. Honestly, with the heavy rain and low visibility, who knows? So, I'm behind this guy as we cross the tracks and begin to climb the steep hill. Despite it turning into 2 lanes on the hill, he's driving right up the middle of the 2 lanes. Figured he didn't realize it was 2 lanes, so I just putter along behind him, keeping my distance. As soon as he reaches the peak of the hill and the road begins to level out, he moves over to the right lane. Yes, finally! So I move over and begin to pass him. As soon as I get past the front of the truck, he swerves behind me quite abruptly and begins flashing his high beams at me. Usually, when someone flashes their lights behind you, in our area anyways, that means turn on your lights, but mine were already on. I checked as soon as he started flashing at me. Weirded out, I put my blinker on and safely change lanes to get out of his way. He follows my lane change and begins laying on his horn. Honk, 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 honk. The honking startled me, and I began to get a lot more flustered. What the hell does this guy want? I moved out of his way, my headlights are on, so why didn't I just speed up and zip away, you may be asking? Well, I grew up in this area. I've been raining heavily all day long, and I know that the service road floods a little in the heavy rain, both on the shoulders and in random spots in the middle of the lanes. It's a small Midwestern town. Our roads are shitty. I had already skidded and nearly wrecked once. I wasn't able to floor it on this bumpy service road that floods and risk wrecking again. There's nothing between that quarry and the highway. About 4 to 5 miles of wooded area. If I wrecked it, it would have just been me and him. So, this went on for the next 4 to 5 miles to the highway. He began tailgating me in addition to the high beams and the honking. Once the tailgating begins, I'm in tears. I don't know what this guy wants from me. I'm trying to stay out of his way and get home safely. That's all I wanted. I changed lanes 2 more times, making 3 total. He followed me from lane to lane. As we approached the highway, I floored it. He couldn't accelerate quickly enough to keep up, and I lost him finally. As soon as I realized I've lost him, and I'm safe on the highway, I just lost it. I was a hysterical wreck. There is only one exit after getting on the highway to stop in the small town the highway runs through. After that, it's all wooded for a good 30 minutes. I thought about getting off at that exit just to calm down and pull it together, but I just wanted to go home, so I sped right past it. I should have stopped. Once the city was no longer visible in my rearview mirror, I was much more calm. I managed to scramble my cell out of my purse and put it in my lap just in case. The rain led up to a drizzle the further I went. I was still pretty on edge. There weren't many other cars on the highway, and majority of them were truckers. I'm cruising along the center lane when the truck next to me in the passing lane begins blaring the horn and moves into my lane, forcing me over to the 3rd lane. He continued moving over, nearly forcing me off the highway. I sped up and changed lanes right in front of him so that I'm back in the center lane. Slow down, so I'm in the line with a front cab. I double-click the home button on my phone and roll down my window. Start taking pictures of the cabbie. I think the flashes made him realize what I was doing, and he began slowing down until he was behind me again. I got a lot of pictures. I sped up and lost sight of him behind me. I was satisfied. I managed to get pics, but I'm just so angry at this point. I pull over onto the shoulder of the highway and wait for him. I just wanted to get behind him so I could get a picture of the license plate and report this asshole. Sadly, he was onto me, for sure. I noticed headlights behind me. A long ways back, but behind me nonetheless. On the shoulder of the highway I waited, keeping an eye on the truckers passing me by, just to be sure I didn't miss him. I noticed a shadow pass through the headlights of the truck, which spooked me quite a bit. Did he get out of the cab? I didn't stick around to find out. I just took off and got home as quickly as possible. The pictures themselves were a total failure. It was still drizzling. The flash combined with the drizzle just resulted in washing out the pictures. I could see the red cab, but no matter what filters I used, there was no making out exactly what the cab said. Red cab trucker. You're the reason I have a dash cam in my car. Let's not meet again. Let a guy in Times Square buy me drinks. He ends up physically pulling me out of a cab. This happened a few years ago, when I was 19 years old and much more naive. I met a group of friends in New York City, planned to stay a couple more days to explore by myself, and then rejoined them in Boston to visit another friend. I love traveling alone. Still do, though. Much more cautiously now. To add to the shit show that was this night, I had been raped and assaulted the previous night by a friend of a friend. That is its own story, but I think contributed to my carelessness as well as desperation to get as shit-faced as possible. I wasn't consciously thinking about this, but I sort of blocked it out. Not that I didn't remember. It's like it was walled off into a section of my brain where I could pretend it didn't happen, though I could peek in at it through the windows and sometimes a noise would escape. I was staying in Manhattan that night. Decided to go to Bluefin, a sushi restaurant I had recommended to me. I had some oysters that were absolutely delicious. Being young and dumb, I did my usual trick to order alcohol and just gave it a go. And then if they asked for my ID, I just pretend I couldn't find it. They probably knew, but couldn't really do anything. Possibly deniability and all that. That happened at this restaurant, so I planned to wrap up my meal and head to a bar in another part of town that I knew didn't card. Just as I was paying my bill, a man spoke to me. I can't remember if he was walking by or sitting close to me, but I know we ended up sitting at Bluefin's bar. He told me I was beautiful and offered to buy me a drink. Without that, I probably wouldn't have given him the time of day, but I immediately thought, fuck yeah, I can get drunk and it won't even have to pay. I sat down and ordered a martini. He ordered some other drink. The conversation started off normal enough. General interest, the city, food, where you're from, what you're doing here. Thankfully, I had the sense to give him a fake name and a fake place of origin, another state I visited frequently. I did not give him a fake age when he asked, though, and I discovered that he was 34. To me at 19, that seemed really old, and I was pretty taken aback, but I didn't want to show it. From here, the conversation sort of devolved. He told me I had a nice shape and kept caressing my waist. I was in a black sweater and pencil skirt. It did give me a nice waist, but it was an off way to say it. He bought me another martini, which I still gladly drank. At some point, he began to talk about hookers. The term he used in my phrasing, it would be sex workers. That really gave me an off feeling in my gut. Why would you bring that up to a woman you're hitting on? He later brought up snorting coke and sped off with her tits, ass, said they were sniffing it off his dick. At this point in my life, I had only drank and smoked weed. I had some friends who had dabbled in drugs, but not really like that. I was feeling fairly sketched out by this combined with his age. At some point, the alcohol caught up to me and I had to pee. I distinctly remember waiting in line and the floor feeling like it was tipping. I was definitely drunk. I had a couple of thoughts went off by myself. One, this guy was sketchy, and I should get out of here, and two, what a dumbass. I don't care for him and have no intention of seeing him again, and I got drunk for free. I think it was a bit of a power play thing in retrospect. I've been taken advantage of, and on a subconscious level it felt good to turn the tables, I guess. I got back and decided it was time to wrap things up and tell him I had to go and meet up with my friends. Not true. I intended to go get shit-faced alone, but no way was I telling him that. He was a little unhappy, but nothing too out of line for the situation. He closed his tab, though, and came out with me as I left. I thanked him for the drinks, and I went to hail a cab. At this point, he got really agitated. He was up in my face and being really pushy, really not wanting me to go, telling me I couldn't go. He started aggressively demanding my number, insisting that I text or call him to meet up when I'm done with my friends. I sort of panicked and regrettably gave him my actual phone number. After that, he started getting really handsy, caressing me, that kind of thing. I was starting to actually feel kind of scared and put my hand out to hail a cab. Thankfully, being such a busy place, a cab stopped for me within a few seconds. I was so relieved, I told him bye again and started to get in. This is when he physically grabs me by the arm. I was more than halfway in, and he pulled me right back out. I should mention that I'm a pretty petite woman, and he was a decently sized guy. Not huge or anything like that, but definitely a little taller and more muscular than average. I was starting to really panic, telling him my friends were waiting for me, and I really had to go. I tried to pull back to the cab, but he just pulled me out again, this time harder. I tried again to pull into the cab. This time he restrained me hard enough that I couldn't really do it at all. He had me tight, me trying to get into the cab and him holding me tighter and closer, During the struggle, he kissed me right on the mouth. It was gross and very forceful. Not a kiss in any traditional sense. I didn't kiss back and it felt aggressive. I kept pulling to the cab, struggling but not outright fighting him. Like I didn't scream or bite or try to kick him. At some point during all of this, he started to grope my waist and then my ass. Using a hand to do this, rather than restrain me, gave me enough slack to sort of slither out of the grip and into the cab. I wasn't even sure all my body parts were in when I slammed the door shut. I saw his face right there, looking right into my eyes. Hurriedly, I told my driver the name of the bar, or the intersection it was on, I don't remember. The driver just kind of chuckled to himself and actually pulled away, nonchalantly, no sense of urgency at all in this whole entire situation. He just took me to the bar like this was all fucking completely normal. There, I met a strange group of college students who let me in on their shots. I got absolutely fucked out of my mind. The most trashed I've ever been in my whole entire life. Bad choice, but it was a fun night. At least the parts I remember. I got back to my hotel just fine, though the driver was concerned and even offered to walk me in. I recall thinking he was strange. I was fine, just drunk, in retrospect. I was intermittently passing out in his back seat. The guy probably thought I was either drugged or at least way too shit-faced to be going around alone. I remember getting in and scrolling through Facebook, then waking up the worst hangover of my life, vomited every 20 minutes like clockwork for 12 hours straight. Though I felt terrible well beyond that. It was relaxing and meditative in a way, a kind of fucked up escape. I'd be consumed by nausea on top of my headache. It would get much more intense until I vomited. Then I would rinse the trash can I was using with bathroom soap, then bring it back to bed. Repeat. I almost closed the door on housekeeping when they tried to come in. Just told them they didn't want to be there right now. My main thought was those poor people didn't deserve to be subjected to this. Vomiting people are freaking gross. Anyways, and I focused on hitting the trash can and cleaning it every time. I really didn't want to leave anything gross like that for housekeeping. Once I was able, I checked my phone. Smartphones were pretty new then, and I did not have one, just an old school flip phone. I checked Facebook on my laptop. I had a bunch of missed calls from a number I did not recognize. Voicemails too that I never listened to. I also had a bunch of texts. These made it clear that it was a guy from Bluefin. Honestly, I can't remember their contents, just that they were laying it on me to meet, to text back, to call back. Of course, this is creepy as fuck, and I was mentally kicking myself for giving him my real number, and also panicking and wondering if he could somehow track me with it. Without really thinking it through, I decided that a perfect out would be to pretend that it was a wrong number. I texted back, "Who is this?" and said I thought he had the wrong number. He flipped out, called me a bitch, a slut, a whore. I continued to pretend to be clueless and tell him he had the wrong number. He said he knew that was a load of bullshit and that I was lying. I kept it up. He told me I was a bitch for doing this, that he would make me pay, that he would find me. I don't remember how, but eventually he stopped messaging me. Nothing ever came of it, and I ended up deciding that since I didn't have a smartphone or internet access, he could find me, especially since I gave him a fake name and hometown. Eventually I got on a plane to meet my friends. I remember using the bathroom and then putting hand sanitizer on. While in the bathroom, I touched my face. The smell of the sanitizer hit, and because it smells like alcohol, I started gagging on the spot and honestly thought I'd throw it up. I didn't tell anyone about this until much, much later. I don't know why. They tell me that I seemed off during that trip, unhappy and not really all there. To be honest, though, I didn't drink and only smoked weed with them when they did it. I don't remember the entire trip outside of a handful of snapshots. There's nothing new. I couldn't tell you what we did or talked about or anything. It was just a combination of the previous night and the sky. I don't remember my trip home at all. I know I took a plane because that's what I always did, and there are receipts and all that. But I don't have even the slightest memory. Not for a while after getting back either, it's blank. I didn't realize until much, much later the gravity of the situation. I think the thing that bothers me most to this day is that this all happened in the middle of Times Square, in the heat of the night. It was full of people bustling, alive. There were people everywhere, enough that the sidewalks were parked. So many people saw our struggle, saw him pull me out of the cab twice, kiss and grope me, while I kept struggling to get away from him. No one did anything. No one said anything. I was surrounded by people, but completely alone. The driver laughed it off like it was a normal occurrence. People have this idea that if a man lays a hand on a woman, he will immediately get his ass kicked. That is not true. No one really gave a fuck. He could do whatever he wanted, and everyone would just go on with their day and let him do it. It was so lit up that it could have been daytime. I think this is compounded with a taxi driver the previous night witnessing sexual assault number 1 by this mutual friend and watching. His eyes, piercing through me via the rear seat mirror, are burned into my mind. Honestly, I fucking hate cab drivers after this. I'm so glad that Uber and Lyft became a thing so soon after. So many people think you are willing to be complicit. Hell, get off and or think it's funny. It's not until many years later and much therapy later that I can think about this more. I wonder so many things. What was he really doing at Bluefin? What was he going to do if I went with him wherever he was going? What was his life like? Was he a lone creeper, assaulter, or was he something more? At least I still got a few Times Square price martinis out of him and made him mad. That's my one comfort about this whole entire story. So, Bluefin guy, let's not meet. And let's hope you don't meet any other woman either. Though, it's haunting to think that he probably has, if we're all honest with ourselves.